We're like those ADHD advert. Have you got signs of ADHD or productivity?
Easily distracted. Look at that over there.
Stop spinning the glass.
Fiddling with things.
Hello and welcome to Evo Podcast episode 14. Bit of a special one this week. I'm joined with John Barker and Dickie Meaden, and we are talking all things Pagani. We've just done a special issue which Dickie has sort of created for us.
Official Pagani correspondent.
Yes, backwards and forwards to Bologna on numerous occasions, and but we thought, it's an interesting topic and brand for us because it was very much at the they were Geneva '99 motor show. You and Harry first met them. We kind of follow their journey all the way through Evos, really, haven't we?
Yeah, well, we launched late '98, didn't we? So Geneva '99 was the first Geneva show we went to. So Harry and I went out. I think I was doing a feature on the sort of behind the scenes launch of the 360 Modena Ferrari, actually, at the same show. And Harry was wandering around doing Harry things. So he found the Zonda and started talking to Horacio, and they got on very well, and we loved the car. So then we'd arranged for John, I think soon after Geneva. I think you're pretty much the first UK journalist in there to show any real interest. I think Geneva's a funny show, isn't it? You get all the weird Rin speed stuff and just peculiar one-offs that seem to appear at Geneva. So I think whilst it's also known for launching supercars, I think people kind of overlooked it, didn't they, really, for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think there is, as you say, there's a lot of hopeful supercars get launched at motor shows and you never see them again. But that, right from the off, the Pagani was different, wasn't it? I remember going to see Horacio at the factory, and when you see a Pagani undressed and you see the carbon, the weights, it's cut like a suit, isn't it? The carbon, it's a centre line. And even in the bits that you wouldn't normally look at, under the clamshells, it's all perfect. And the windows were proper, sort of European kite marked. So it was being done properly.
Yeah, it was properly homologated car, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that I came back and I said, this is a proper thing. This is a real thing. And I think it was his friend Fangio, because he's a fellow Argentinian, wasn't he? Yeah,
I think he was his hero. So I don't know that they weren't friends at the time, but I think they became acquainted, and then Fangio championed Horacio with Mercedes, which is where the engine deal came from, which looking back is totally out of character for Mercedes anyway, isn't it? But where anyone else would use an LS crate engine or some kind of off-the-shelf solution for their car, he went straight in.
Yeah, and it wasn't huge horsepower, was it?
It wasn't big money, wasn't big. I think it was less than 400 horsepower. And I think the car was less than 400,000, I think, at the time, which was a 30-40% more money, maybe twice as much, I don't know, as the equivalent Lamborghini at the time. But given the way it was constructed and how rare and specialised the car was, it seems like very, very innocent, naive days, really, then, when you think about it now.
Well, he was Lamborghini, wasn't he? And he was trying to persuade Lamborghini to use carbon fibre, and they weren't. It was early days.
Yeah, I think he wanted them to invest in their own autoclave because he did that weird Countach Evolution or Evoluzione.
Funny wheel trims and things.
They looked like it had come out of Tron or something, but that was way back in the 80s. Yeah. So I think he wanted them to invest in an autoclave so he could carry on doing his thing, and they didn't. So that's where Modena design came from. Really, I'm a terrible Pagani fanboy, but he is an extraordinary man. Just to talk to him, and he's very charismatic, but quite small, I don't know, he's not this kind big,
of quiet, isn't he?
He's not this big room filling, sort of likes the sound of his own voice kind of character. He's very modest in the way he talks and presents himself, but he's an absolute genius, the things that he's done. And I think we're very used to manufacturers now making carbon fibre cars, but he invented the types of carbon fibre he used to make his own car. So the carbo titanium weave stuff. And he's got so many patents for different materials that he goes that many steps beyond where any other manufacturer does. And that sort of pervades the whole, always has been shot through the whole project, I think.
Because although it only had, I think it was 379 horsepower, it was a very lightly breathed on Well, it's probably only the exhausts.
Yeah, I
That were
don't
any
think it
different.
had any
They hadn't
tuning
opened it
as
up,
such.
had they?
Yeah.
It was
Just the exhaust to that sort
No.
of plug socket 4-pipe.
Yeah, it's just 6 litres, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it only weighed less than 1,200 kilos, didn't it?
Yeah.
He was a big fan of Gordon Murray, what Gordon Murray had done.
Yeah.
So, he wanted his car to be light, and obviously carbon was the trick. Hit the ground running, because there was another guy involved with it, wasn't there, on the ride and handling side, a certain Loris Picocci,
Yeah.
who is just a fantastic touch on making a car capable but also very approachable.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the fastest car that we had. This is the first sort of real drive we had of it, where we threw it in against the competition.
Yeah, we had a 6-litre VT Murcielago 550 Maranello, 996 turbo,
Yeah,
360 Modena, and a Viper
Viper.
GTS.
yeah,
Bit of a curveball there, but yeah. So it was our kind of gathering of the kind of big hitting supercars of the day, which again all seem quite modest compared
Yeah.
to now, don't they? But I think the Zonda it sort of predated the hypercar really. So now it looks out of place because everyone associates it with being a £5-6 million
yeah,
car, and then it was 350,000-400,000 pound thing that very few people had heard of. But it just felt really supple, didn't it?
yeah.
It was like a kind of scaled up, not quite a scaled up Elise, but it had that delicacy, and you could
Yeah.
place it, and it rode really well, and it had lots of grip, but it was progressive, and everything was really nicely matched. It was just a properly honed thing, no rough edges at all.
Didn't win the test though. That was the Lambo, which I think was the first time that Audi had got
that was the
involved.
first hour. It was Diablo,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
And it was very
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, it was a cracking car.
Yeah,
What was your expectations then when John came back from the factory and you were sent out to drive it?
I think we knew enough about Horacio and we'd seen the car and all the ingredients that it was going to be something pretty special. But again, no one at the time, it all happened quite quickly. So we started our kind of dialogue with Horacio at the show. Then John went out maybe a month later, and then I went out not long after that to drive the car. I think maybe they'd had one other journalist in it. I think it might have been Paul Frere actually, but we was first in the UK, and so I hadn't read anything
Yeah.
about what it was like to drive, so had no sense. But yeah, it just one of those cars that feels right straight away really, and it felt quick, where a Lamborghini of the time, even a 6-litre VT, was much better than what had come before, but that still felt quite weight up high,
Quite heavy,
and
yeah,
just a little
yeah.
bit ponderous, and still rooted in that kind of macho 70s supercars had to be unwieldy and heavy and challenging in the wrong way kind of driving experience, and the Zonda was none of that.
Yeah.
It was just quite mellow and free and quick without really having to dry your palms on your
Yeah.
jeans every 5 minutes, and it looked like nothing else inside and out, and it was built like nothing else. The only comparator we had was a McLaren F1, I think,
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of the way it shines with that
the lack
attention
of
to
mass.
detail, and the way you drive it. But it's so much nicer to drive than an
McLaren.
F1.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you sort of come back thinking, I think it's really good, but can you is it really that good, or am I
Yeah.
am I just getting a bit carried away
Yeah.
with the moment? But it definitely felt. Gus and I went out to shoot it, and we spent some time with Horacio, because when he's there, he's still 25 years later, he still cares deeply about what people think of the cars. But I knew it was something special, because he gave me a really early C12 brochure, and I got him to sign it, because I thought this is as close as I'm ever going to get to driving a really early Ferrari.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Enzo Ferrari's there handing the car over for you, and it's kind of come to pass, hasn't it? He's a special guy, and the cars are continue to be very true to what he did with the Zonda, but he's just managed to capture what a Pagani is, and not only repeat it, but or surpass each car. But he's passed on all that knowledge and instinctive feel for what the car should be to a very, very large team of people now. It's not just him and a couple of other guys. There's hundreds of people there, and it's a very, very, very impressive operation when you're kind of used to hearing the struggles of other much more established names and how they're needing huge injections of capital just to keep the lights on, and he'd never borrowed any money when he started, and hadn't. I think there were some supportive early customers, but it's always been a family business until quite recently. And I think it's had some Saudi investment. They bought 30%, I think, but it's still largely a family business. So it's like nowhere else.
Did it feel as well when you drove it, particularly amongst those established traditional supercars, that actually this is something other? This is a supercar plus. The term hypercar hadn't been invented back then. Did it feel different the way it drove? That didn't have that sense of mass, but it was obviously you made the Lamborghini win. But did it feel something that actually this isn't comparable with these cars? It's something completely different.
We were just sort of getting to know it really, and it was very friendly, very approachable.
I think I remember that car was the car that we had in the test, which we'll put the cover up. That was still their development car, and I do remember it had a slightly snaggly gear shift. I think that had a 5-speed box that they, like probably an old, I don't know what it would be, a drag box or something that would have been used in other supercars, and they fairly quickly came out with a 6-speed box, and I think the gear shift in that was one of the things that we weren't sure about, and the car was slightly rough around the edges because it was a development car.
But I still had one of my best ever drives in that, which I then repeated a few years later, which was we were based in Harry's villa, legendary villa,
in Tuscany,
and then we were rendezvousing, I think it was at Mr. Bulgari's villa, because he had more space outside the front. We were going to do the static shots. Everybody turned off, which is the Valdorcia sort of Milmilia road.
It's one of the great roads in that part of Italy, isn't it?
But everybody else turned off up the dirt road to get to the Mr. Bulgari's house, and I went all the way around up to Sartiano, through Sartiano, and came down the other way, just because I thought it was going to take them ages to position the cars. They all need dusting off, and it was a fantastic drive. It was the perfect afternoon, beautifully warm, and the car just drifted through all the lovely corners, and that's when I knew it was pretty special. And then when I think they did a convertible that we went to drive for
they did a roadster,
and I tried to do the same drive again, and it was November. We got fogged off and we landed somewhere else instead of Pisa. But we got to Sartiano and the sun came out, and I did exactly the same drive the other way, and it was just as good. Yeah,
well, his cars they always weighed, probably be proved wrong by somebody, but there was hardly anything in it weight-wise between any of the roadsters and the coupes, and there was nothing in it in terms of rigidity. So it's an interesting mix, because they're kind of highly strung to look at, aren't they? They're very ornate and intricate and kind of OTT in a respect. Although I think when you look back at the Zonda now, it looks
it's quite
clean and just sculptural and a lovely car. But they're very they look like nothing else.
They're quite fancy, aren't they?
The way the car developed and got better, it didn't get more extreme, did it really?
No.
It didn't get hardcore. It didn't get distracted by having to appeal to a smaller and smaller niche. It got a better gearbox, and then it went to the S, so it had a bigger engine, and then it went to the F, and it had more power and sharper engine response, but it still fundamentally worked really well on the road. Although the F also set, I never associate Zondas with lap times, but it was the fastest car around the Nürburgring in 2007, I think it was.
It kind of fits, doesn't it? Because it's a car that rides well, and you need a car that rides the bumps.
Yeah.
At the Nürburgring.
They've kept quite discreet, haven't they? They understand the customer, so
you
don't associate them with maybe doing a Nürburgring time or track, but they build a car for customers and clients who
they do quietly go about their business. And the Nürburgring lap time, I remember it because I was there, because it was the Fangio connection, 2007, so it would have been 50 years since Fangio's German Grand Prix, best race of his life in the 250F, and I managed to get a 250F to shoot with it, and so it was quite a cool job to do. But even now I don't connect Pagani with chasing lap times, but skipping on, we can come back to all these others in a bit, but the Huayra that I drove in this issue, BC Roadster, that held the lap record at Spa for production supercars. So they're just
Yeah.
quietly do the job, but they never shout about the cars particularly.
I haven't driven the Huayra, but the last Zonda I drove was a Zonda R,
Yeah.
which is you say it's not really
Well, I think that held a Nürburgring record as well, actually.
just like the standard car. It is. You can imagine Horacio styling it, sketching, and then just making it. No compromise. What he sketches, whether it's the interior or the exterior, becomes the car because he knows how to make things.
Yeah. That's what he's sort of instilled in the team. I'll get very nerdy now, but his hero is Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
And actually, you look at the way he sketches, and there's a similarity there. But the whole form and function thing, I know it's a well-used trope by car designers and car makers, but he insists that the engineer is also the designer. They know what they need to make, and then they have to make it beautiful as well. It's not styling centres this, no, we've got to make it into something that works. It's all it's a very joined up way of making cars, and I think that enables them to do the things they do.
Yeah.
In a way that no one else, because they don't have to share the components across other models, or it's
they can make small batches.
They make one-off. They'll make one-off cars, and they're fully homologated. It's not like, oh no, you can only drive this in certain country, and it seems, well, why doesn't everyone else do this? But I don't think anyone else can. They don't have the customer base that Pagani have. I remember him saying years ago that his customers don't ever really tend to sell. I mean, this was early days before Huayra, and Huayra went into America, and that expanded their market. But people just tended to have, it's like art collectors follow a particular artist. It's like, I'm going to have an S now, and then I'll have an F, and I'll have which is another world, isn't it, to most people? But
I bet Harry's kicking himself he sold his as well, because that's a very original car.
From Zonda, the Zonda years, it appeared in Car the Year, didn't it? The
Yes.
original Zonda. The S, wasn't it, I think?
It was the S. Loris was there.
Yeah.
He apologised that the car wasn't set up quite as he'd like it. He's a very fastidious man as well. But we had a great time at that circuit in Umbria, which we can't remember the name of. You say form following function. It didn't quite live up to expectation when we did the 200 mile an hour on the Autobahn story.
Yeah, I wasn't on that test, but yeah.
Well, come on, just because you weren't there didn't mean it wasn't the
your
reason
idea,
they didn't
though.
do
No.
But we had Andy Wallace there, and he couldn't
Yeah.
make it go 200.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was until the exhaust went blue. They kept trying, him and Rog, and it just wouldn't quite do 200 miles an hour.
It was like pegged at 199, wasn't it, for mile after mile?
About 7 miles, I think they've got on the data log, still at 199. But yeah, it's a special car.
Yeah, so it's of an era, isn't it? But it's also the fact it's very rare for a hypercar or supercar manufacturer to be launched sort of recently, that you've been able to follow its journey, and the fact they haven't courted marketing side and everything we do we got to talk about. It's very.
I think they've quietly gone on following their own path, so they didn't get drawn into the Bugatti Koenigsegg,
the power races
over top speeds, which is, there's nothing wrong with chasing that. It's a different challenge, isn't it? But I think he's smart enough to know his customers. The way the cars have evolved, they haven't really made a wrong step. I don't think it because they've been brave enough to finish the Zonda, and then the Huayra was a totally different character of car because it was turbocharged, and he wanted to mimic the sensation of being sat in a jumbo jet or something on the runway, just as it's that kind of endless sense of performance, which it has. It was never quite as engaging as the Zonda, I don't think, because it had a paddle shift box as well, but they've kept going at that car, and they introduced a bit more aggression and a bit more performance, and they've just continued to tweak it. So I hadn't driven a Huayra since the very early car, and then the two Huayras that I went out to drive for the cover story, one was the Huayra BC Roadster, which has got quite a lot of aero, and it's quite aggressive, and it's got more power and sharp, and quite a different vibe for them, but it was much more to my liking than the original Huayra, and then the Coda Lunga, which was based on the Huayra, but they only made 5 of them, and it's fully homologated. It's this amazing sort of long tail, wild looking thing. But that had a slightly more power, even though it looks more classic, more sort of 60s inspired.
Yeah, it's very elegant looking, isn't it? Compared to any of the Paganis, it's quite a different design.
It goes like
ethos.
Stink. Still, it's and although they're turbocharged, there's no hybrid, none of that. But it's still like well over 800 horsepower and something that's 1,200 kilos. So it's. And it makes proper noises now. I think the original Huayra, it would make these funny kind of turbo induction wastegate kind of noises, but it didn't have this deep roiling kind of noise that they do now. So,
was there any concerns when Zonda ended and Huayra was coming with very different turbocharging, different manual gearbox? Was there that hang on, they're going down the wrong path?
I think it was quite a culture shock. I mean, we were in the weird position that we'd kind of lived with Harry's Zonda, didn't we? Yeah. So it was like it would be parked out in the car park and someone would do the sandwich run in it, or it's like a totally bizarre state of affairs. But I think we got to know that car so well, and Harry did some upgrades to it, so it kind of was a bit like an S and a bit like an F, wasn't it? It was kind of part way between the two. But yeah, we knew that car intimately, and then the Huayra was a very different proposition, although it still was joint winner of Car of the Year, so it was clearly a very special thing. I think the appreciation for the Zonda's reflected in their values now, isn't it? Yes. They've gone completely crazy. I think it was listed as one of the top performing asset classes. I think it's like 27 times the original value, some of them, which is ridiculous, isn't it? But I think they didn't make many of them, and no one else made a car like it, so they're highly sought after. And another side of their business, which is really smart, is I think they appreciate the customers that have maybe come to Pagani late but are now ordering Utopias to precisely their specification. They will take a used Zonda and they'll either completely restore it to original, keep it as original spec, but they even keep billets of the same metal. So the parts that they machined for the car at the time, they still have supplies of those billets, so they can remanufacture more parts, or they kind of not resto mod, but they will upgrade and personalise cars in house as well in another department. So they keep everything.
Everything's in house.
Everything's in house, and it just keeps their customers engaged, I think.
It also keeps the quality control, doesn't it? I remember when John came back from the first factory visit. You were just talking about they were the first, obviously very early with carbon fibre, but it was that attention to detail. The weave all had to match. It wasn't, even if you never saw it, you knew every underside bit was, as you said about the designing engineering, we want to design this to look like this, but you had to be able to make it yourself as well.
Yeah,
it's just
there's so much stuff you can geek out with, and I think certainly if I was in the position where suddenly was a ultra high net worth person, I would definitely have a Pagani, because there's something magical about partly our connection with it, I suppose, and we've vicariously lived this sort of life where we've got to know Horacio and driven all the cars, and there's a shared kind of experience of our business and his business doing their thing. So the Utopia, which was the primary reason for going out, so the latest car, sort of third instalment.
It's remarkable, isn't it? It's 25 years and it's the third car they've done.
Yeah, it's nuts, isn't it? But there's a company that was just next door to the new factory, or atelier I think they call it, but just down the road from the first building. There was a really high-end CNC machining business called Asper, which was based next door. They would do Formula One parts and aerospace parts, and that's recently been bought, sort of incorporated into Pagani as a business, although I think they still make components for other people, but everything's in-house. So it would make more sense if you saw a picture of the steering wheel in a Utopia, but they machine the whole steering wheel from a best part of 50 kilo billet of alloy, and it's machined down to like 1.5 kilos or something.
That's crazy.
With these crazy multi-axis, multi-head
yeah.
machines that can go in from all kinds of angles, turn the whole piece around in an automated way, swap, and you get these most extraordinary components. The guy that runs it is brilliant. He's like a I don't know. He must be in his. I would think in his certainly in his 50s, possibly in his 60s. But you can see from his hands, they're like engineers' hands. But the excitement in his face when he was taking us around and looking at these new, like his prized new CNC machine that I don't know, it's like €1.5 million or something for this thing. And we talked about blags, didn't we, in a previous podcast? But he gave me a tiny little alloy piece that just had a machined silhouette of a Utopia, but then, which is lovely, but then he showed me another, like a test piece, and it had these numbers on it, and it was 0.5, 0.4, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1 of a micron. That it was just to calibrate the machine on this polished face, and he showed me the tool that they use to do the finest. I love it. I think that for people that spend a fortune on cars,
that's very Pagani.
It's not just the car, is it? I think it's the experience of commissioning it and meeting the people and going and watching it being made. And
I think that's what makes them stand out, isn't it, from some of the other hypercar low volume, whether they're all low volume, aren't they? But whether it's got that emotion, hasn't it? That personal touch, and it's everything that goes into the car has the same approach, because they're not focused on just a speed record or a lap time or a horsepower. It's the whole thing. So therefore, the attention to detail, whether it's design, the engineering, the manufacturing, the presentation, nothing is left to chance.
Do we know how many they've made of each one?
oh God, I know you're going to ask me that. It's in the interview, and I can't remember. I'd have to have a look. I think
if only there was something
it's
you could
around
reach out to.
I think it's around 500 cars in total.
Across the two.
And obviously that
three.
number has increased over the years, but I think they made somewhere between 50 and 60 cars last year, so one a week or thereabouts. I don't think that includes the restored cars and stuff. That would be getting their production run of Utopias or Utopia Roadsters or something, but it's still small numbers. And I think the problem they have is Horacio, and there's another guy called Hannes Zanon who is their commercial director, who's been there right since the beginning as well, and he was sort of explaining the problem, a nice problem to have, but they could easily sell 2 or 3 times the number of cars they make in the year to the same people every year. So he said how trying to keep our loyal customers happy whilst bringing enough fresh people in, which I think is why the restoration side and the grandi complicazioni department is where they'll build these one-offs. And I think Unico
is complication.
It's hard enough to say, isn't it? Let alone do. But I think that gives them ways of, now there's more cars out there, sort of in the market. If someone, particularly in the States, if they buy a Huayra, they can bring it back to the factory and then have it trimmed exactly how they wanted, or paint trim.
So it's just like going back as if you're ordering it new.
Basically, and then you get a brand new, effectively get a brand new car back.
We'll talk just on the new car. So the Utopia is the latest car, the Coupe and Roadster. When you're out there, obviously car companies very rarely talk about future product. Was there a sense of where the company, or where Horacio wants the company to go, and what obviously they're facing the same challenges everyone is facing, their low volume, which
I think
helps massively.
I think they'll keep doing what they're doing. He kind of went against pretty much everyone else in the company and all his customers. He kind of asked them if they wanted an EV, and everyone said no, but he still explored the idea, and is very kind of thoughtful person. There's always a process before, but it's because he's thought everything through, and he's saying, well, it's not I'm not necessarily against EV, but he said that there's a lot of merits, but it's just the technology isn't appropriate for his cars. It's like, well, our cars weigh 1,200 kilos. I'm not going to make a car that weighs 800 kilos or 1,000 kilos more than that, and he doesn't think they're particularly safe, because trying to manage that much mass And even if they are safe, he's saying it takes so much electronic intervention to keep that kind of mass and momentum on the road. It's too far away from the feel he wants his cars to have. But, come such time that he can make a car that's 1,500 kilos, then it needs less management because it's lighter, and then it's coming closer to where his cars are. But I think Utopia is still quite young. Yeah. So, I'm sure there'll be a progression of subsequent models. They've got they've sort of expanded their customer track driving experience. So they've got an evolution of their track car.
Yeah.
Huayra,
we'll drive that later this year.
Although I think it's having a new name, But yes. Yeah, we'll drive that this year later on, which will be great. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that Mercedes relationship, though. They're haven't gone down the EV route and hybrid route, but you're still relying or have a relationship with a manufacturer that is obviously in the global OEM space.
They've got that resource, haven't they? If they need to call upon it or want to call upon it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I went to drive the AMG GT e-performance car, there was AMG 1 unloading from a transporter, and you look at it and you think it's just not as exciting as anything the Italians can make, but they're such a good partners. Then you think Cosworth could make a nice naturally aspirated engine for Pagani, couldn't it?
Yeah,
in whatever spec they want.
Yes,
I think they're at the point now where the V12 that's in the Utopia is a Pagani engine. It's not a. I think they've, in conjunction with HWA, but it is their own.
It's their own bespoke.
It's not used in anything else, and there are differences to how it was previously.
Because they had a process in the AMG of who could make the engines for Pagani when they were producing them. One person. I remember you coming back and telling us that.
Yeah.
You relying on him not being poached by someone.
No, there's like a board in the engine build shops. There's a huge board of, because you get the shield of who makes your engine on the top of the engine, don't they? And they have all of those with various colour codings.
Yeah.
Who can build what, whether it's the 4-cylinder or the V8. And then there's only one guy who can make all of them. Just the one guy, and he's the guy who built every Pagani engine.
They're really special things. It's quite unlike any other engine I think you can have now, because it's not high revving, but it's free revving. There's a point to revving it. It's got enormous performance, low and mid, but you still have the opportunity. And I know we always say we hate different dynamic modes, but there are, again, the technology is in the car, but it's not right in your face and at the forefront, but you can really wake the thing up and make it pretty angry. But it has this breadth of this GT car at one end and a proper hypercar at the other, even though it doesn't, but it looks like nothing else, the Utopia. There's no real visible wings, or most of the aero work is done under the car.
Just the elegance that they get into the design of the Utopia.
There's something about that car. It looks, I know it's the usual thing, or it looks better in the flesh than it does in photos, but there's something you just can't stop looking at it, the shapes and the detailing, and then you see kind of a theme or a parallel between a detail on the side and the way they've treated the rear, and the interior is very it's got these sort of ship's funnel kind of air vents which are very reminiscent of the Zonda. So there's a lot of original Pagani DNA in it, but it's quite fresh, I think, and a genuinely beautiful car. Really beautiful car.
Your favourite? Could you pick a favourite Pagani? As you've driven them all, so John and I can abstain from this. Don't get it wrong.
I haven't driven lots of the late Zonda, so I never drove an R or Cinque or any of those. But I think
you got your violin.
Yeah, I feel sorry for you.
I think a Zonda, of all of those, I love the Zonda F, and I think Utopia is really, really special because it's got a manual box as well.
Yeah.
I think the first batch of cars had the paddle shift box, but I think now the manual box is on stream. I think a lot more of the Roadster came after the coupe in terms of build and deliveries. So I think although you'd expect the coupe to have more manual than paddle. It's actually the other way around, but only due to the availability of the box originally, I think. But it's a really nice shift. Light. It's quite similar in feel to the Ford GT.
Oh yeah.
So that free kind of
Sort of you moving heavy things, but in a very light way.
yeah. It's just they spent a long time on the shift quality.
Which again, for the volumes they're doing, that's not a small investment and a small amount of time, but it's building a car that the customer wants, isn't it? You're fortunate, aren't you, that you know every customer by name and you've got them in your phone book.
Pretty much. But they're working with Bosch, or they've got all the OE.
But they then work with the
process.
massive OE suppliers, so you're dealing with all the proper suppliers. So the end result is these cars that are phenomenal to drive.
Yeah, it's the dream, really, and the nature of the whole place. Like you walk in from the outside, the where they've been for a little while now, but I still think of it as the new factory. But it's typical kind of metal box from the outside. But then you walk in, and it's built like a Italian sort of old town square. It's totally weird. There's a little bit of sort of Disneyland about it. There's a clock tower.
Really?
The clock chimes, and then there's the build bays. Instead of just having build bays, there's these sort of brick arched bits that they're parked in, and it's arranged a bit like a town square, I suppose, which sounds bizarre, but it doesn't feel like you're working in a metal box.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So it's just got this sort of, he's very keen for everyone to enjoy working at Pagani. The workforce is really young as well, surprisingly young. I think the average age is possibly under 30, which is extraordinary.
It is.
And they've got big carbon composites, because that's his thing. But they lay all the tubs and everything up. You can see the area up there, and then all the parts come in, and then there's a build area in the main sort of floor space, and then there's the build bays for the special cars, and they're not all special, and then there's just a line of cars waiting to be restored or be kind of personalised. So you kind of don't know where to look when you walk in there.
It's quite a journey, quite a story, isn't it?
Well, it is, because Horacio's kids, so Leonardo and Christopher, were like that big, and they both work in the company. Christopher runs all the marketing, so he spent quite a lot of time showing us around, and it's just fun. It's really nice. It's a really nice continuing story, really. Horacio looks annoyingly young and fresh, and
About the same as he ever did.
hasn't really changed at all.
When you two look as no, anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So it was great to be able to spend some time in the cars, obviously, but to immerse ourselves, reacquaint ourselves. I think we were very close through the Zonda years, and then I think the Huayra stuff, we kind of drifted a little bit, and maybe they didn't need to do quite so much press, and now we've kind of reacquainted ourselves. So hopefully we can spend a bit more time in them.
A bit more time on a Ryanair flight back and forth.
Yeah.
No, very worthwhile putting that all together. Thank you very much.
No
for
worries,
your
I'll do it
memories. Yeah, I'm sure you will. Yeah, I've seen the invoice. I'm sure you'd like to do it again. John, Dickie, and everyone else, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Steve. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.